The VA claims process is a battlefield, and too many veterans are walking onto it unarmed. You served your country, you earned these benefits. But the system is designed to be confusing, complex, and utterly exhausting. If you are currently fighting the VA, or if your claim has been denied, you are probably making one of the 7 critical mistakes we are about to dissect. These errors aren't small clerical slips. They are fundamental misunderstandings of VA law that cost veterans hundreds of thousands of dollars in earned compensation. We are talking about the difference between financial stability and struggling paycheck to paycheck. This isn't about being wrong. It's about not understanding the legal burden of proof required to win. Stop leaving money on the table. Stop assuming the VA is on your side. Let's dive deep into the biggest mistakes veterans make when they file claims without the necessary legal guidance, starting with the single most common reason claims fail across the board. Chakar? Mistake 1. Failing to establish a service connection, the missing nexus. This is the bedrock. This is where 90% of initial claims crumble. The VA requires 3 things for a successful claim: an in-service event, a current diagnosis, and the critical link between the two, which is called the bond nexus. On. If you don't establish this nexus, your claim is dead on arrival. Veterans often mistakenly believe that simply showing they have a diagnosis, say chronic back pain, is enough if they can recall hurting it during their service years. That is a massive misconception. The VA doesn't award benefits based on correlation. They demand causation. They need medical, scientific, and legal evidence that proves your current disability originated in, was caused by, or was aggravated by your active duty service. Without that definitive link, documented by a medical professional who understands VA requirements, your claim is simply a sad story, not a legal argument. Think of the nexus as the bridge. Your service is one side, your current suffering is the other. If the bridge is out, you can't get paid. Many veterans rely solely on their service medical records or their SMRs to prove the connection. But what happens if the injury wasn't properly documented 20 years ago? What if you toughed it out and never went to sick call? This is the reality for countless veterans. The absence of documentation in the SMR is not the end of the claim, but it dramatically increases the burden on the veteran to provide substitute evidence. This is where the legal expertise becomes invaluable. A good legal representative doesn't just look at what the VA has, they look at what the VA needs. They commission independent medical opinions, or IMOs, specifically tailored to meet the VA's legal standard of proof. An IMO is not just a note from your family doctor saying, yes, he has PTSD. It must be a detailed, evidence-based report from an expert who reviews your entire service history, your current medical records, and explicitly states, it is at least as likely as not that the veteran's current condition is a direct result of their service. The phrase, at least as likely as not, is the key legal standard. If your doctor uses vague language, if they don't cite the necessary medical literature, or if they don't acknowledge the specific stressor event, the VA will discount it entirely. This mistake is often compounded by veterans submitting an IMO from a doctor who has no understanding of VA law. They might be a brilliant physician, but they are not a VA claims expert. The VA sees this as junk science, dismisses the connection, and issues a denial letter that looks cold and impenetrable. Furthermore, veterans often fail to understand the different types of service connection. It's not just direct connection. You must explore secondary service connections, which we will touch on later, and presumptive service connections. Are you claiming a condition related to Agent Orange exposure, Gulf War syndrome, burn pits? These claims have different legal thresholds and require specific forms and documentation. If you file a presumptive claim as a direct connection claim, you are wasting time and effort, and you are inviting denial. Understanding which category your claim falls into is the first step toward building a successful legal argument. Without a rock-solid nexus statement supported by medical and legal precedent, You are simply hoping the VA grants you pity, and the VA does not operate on pity. They operate on evidence. The sheer volume of evidence required to establish a strong nexus can be overwhelming. It involves cross-referencing military occupational specialty duties, deployment locations, specific events, and connecting them all the way through decades of medical history. Many veterans give up here, assuming because the initial paperwork was denied, they must be wrong. No, you just failed to meet the highly technical legal standard. This mistake, the lack of a proper nexus, is the most costly and the most preventable when professional help is involved. It is the foundation upon which the entire monetary award rests, and if the foundation is cracked, the entire structure collapses. Chapter Mistake 2. Ignoring the critical importance of lay evidence. Moving past the medical proof, the second massive error veterans make is dismissing the power of lay evidence, often called lay statements or buddy statements. Many veterans think their claim is purely medical, focused only on doctor's notes and service records. This is fundamentally wrong, especially when the service records are incomplete, which they often are. Lay evidence fills the gaps. Lay evidence is personal testimony from people who witnessed the event, witnessed the onset of the condition, or witnessed the severity of your current symptoms. It provides the necessary context and credibility that cold medical records simply cannot convey. Veterans commonly overlook two types of lay evidence: the buddy statement and the veteran's own statement. Let's start with the buddy statement. If you were injured in a training accident, who was there? If you were exposed to a specific traumatic event, who saw it? If you developed symptoms of PTSD or TBI immediately after a deployment, who were you living with? Who noticed the change? These individuals, fellow service members, spouses, family members, or longtime friends, can provide critical first-hand accounts that corroborate your story. The mistake here is twofold. First, veterans often fail to seek these statements entirely. Second, when they do submit them, the statements are weak, vague, or lack the necessary detail. A weak buddy statement reads, "John was in pain after the deployment." A strong, legally relevant buddy statement reads, "In October 2005, during our deployment to location, I personally witnessed John fall 15 feet from the Humvee turret during a sudden stop. He immediately grabbed his lower back and struggled to walk for the remainder of the mission. He constantly complained of severe, sharp pain, and I had to help him carry his gear back to the barracks." Notice the difference. Specific dates, specific events, specific observed symptoms. The VA is looking for factual, observable evidence, not just emotional support. The veteran's own statement is equally crucial and frequently mishandled. Your personal statement should be a narrative roadmap for the VA rater. It should detail the stressor event, the immediate symptoms, the progression of the condition over the years, and how the disability currently impacts your daily life, your social functioning, AIA, and your ability to work. Veterans often submit a brief, generic paragraph. This is a huge mistake. Your statement needs to be comprehensive, detailed, and consistent with the medical evidence. You must describe the pain, the limitations, the emotional toll, and the functional deficits in painful detail. This evidence is particularly vital in claims where the service records are silent. If you are claiming a mental health condition like PTSD, the VA requires evidence of the stressor event. If that event wasn't documented in an official report, a strong buddy statement from someone who witnessed the trauma, or even a detailed personal statement describing the circumstances of the trauma, can be the difference between a 70% rating and a denial. The legal strategy here is to use lay evidence to prove what happened in service and use medical evidence to prove the current connection. If you neglect the lay evidence, you create a massive, unsupported gap in your timeline, and the VA will exploit that gap every single time. Remember, the VA operates under the principle of benefit of the doubt, but you must first provide sufficient evidence to earn that doubt. Lay evidence is the key to unlocking that benefit. It humanizes the claim, it validates the suffering, and when structured correctly by someone who understands the VA's legal requirements for probative value, it becomes undeniable proof. Don't just get a friend to sign a form. Get them to write a detailed, factual account, notarized if possible, that backs up the specific points of your claim. Ignoring this resource is sacrificing one of the most powerful tools in your claim's arsenal. Chapter? Mistake 3. Mismanaging the compensation and pension. C&P. Examination. This mistake is perhaps the most immediate act of LF sabotage. The C&P exam is the VA's primary tool for gathering information about your current condition. It is not a treatment session. It is not a friendly conversation. It is a one-time, high-stakes medical legal interview that determines the fate of your claim. Veterans frequently enter the C&P exam unprepared, overly casual, or conversely, overly aggressive, and they make errors that are irreversible without a lengthy appeal process. The fundamental error is believing the C&P examiner is your doctor. They are not. They are contracted by the VA to serve the VA's interests, which is to gather sufficient information to rate your disability accurately, which often means finding reasons to rate it lower or deny it entirely if the evidence is weak. Veterans often minimize their symptoms during the exam. Why? Because they are used to toughing it out, or they feel awkward complaining, or they simply forget to mention key details. This is the worst possible time to be a stoic warrior. When the examiner asks, "How is your back pain?" and you say, "It's okay, I manage," you have just told the VA that your pain is not severe. You must be brutally honest and detailed about your worst day, not your average day. You must detail the functional limitations. If you can only lift 10 pounds, you must say that. If your anxiety prevents you from going to the grocery store 3 times a week, you must say that. If you omit crucial details about your pain, range of motion, or mental health triggers, the examiner's report, which is the cornerstone of the VA's decision, will reflect that minimization. Another massive mistake is failing to review and understand the Disability Benefits Questionnaire, or DBQ, relevant to your claim before. The exam. The DBQ is the form the examiner uses to document your condition. It asks specific, legally mandated questions. If you know what questions are being asked, you can ensure your answers directly address those points. For example, the DBQ for a musculoskeletal condition requires specific measurements of range of motion. If you don't fully articulate your pain during movement, the examiner may stop the measurement prematurely, resulting in a lower rating. If you are claiming migraines, the DBQ requires details on frequency, duration, and prostrating severity. If you forget to mention the prostrating aspect, meaning you must lie down, you lose critical rating points. Veterans who attend C&P exams without legal preparation often fail to address the service connection aspect. While the examiner is primarily focused on the current diagnosis and severity, they may ask questions about the origin. If you cannot clearly articulate the stressor event or the in-service injury that led to the current condition, you create doubt. A prepared veteran knows how to seamlessly integrate the service connection narrative into their symptom description. Furthermore, veterans sometimes neglect the crucial step of requesting a copy of the C&P report immediately after the exam. This report is the VA's evidence against you. If the report contains factual errors, misstatements, or misinterpretations of your symptoms, you must be prepared to challenge it immediately. Waiting until the denial letter arrives is too late. Legal guidance ensures that the veteran knows exactly what to look for in the report, the range of motion measurements, the functional limitations assessment, and the bar sedum examiner's final conclusion regarding the nexus. Mismanagement of the C&P exam is a self-inflicted wound that can take years to correct through the appeals process. Treat the C&P exam with the seriousness of a courtroom deposition, because that is exactly what it is. Barber, shared mistake. 4. Not utilizing the fully developed claim, FDC. Process correctly. The VA offers several ways to file a claim, but the fully developed claim, or FDC, is often touted as the fastest route. However, veterans frequently misuse the FDC process, turning a potential fast track into a guaranteed denial. The premise of the FDC is simple. The veteran certifies that they have submitted all necessary evidence to substantiate their claim at the time of submission. The VA then promises a faster decision because they don't have to spend time gathering records. Sounds great, right? The mistake lies in the veteran's definition of fully developed. A veteran may submit their diagnosis, their service records, and a brief statement, believing that is everything. The VA, however, defines fully developed as having all the evidence necessary to meet the legal standard of proof, which includes the critical nexus, the severity evidence, and all relevant medical history. If you submit an FDC that is missing a critical piece of evidence, such as a strong independent medical opinion establishing the nexus or detailed lay statements regarding severity, the VA will review it, find the claim lacking, and issue a denial quickly. The consequence of a prematurely filed FDC is that you lose the VA's duty to assist. When you file a standard claim, the VA has a legal obligation to help you gather certain federal records, like your SMRs or records from VA hospitals. When you file an FDC, you waive much of that duty. You are telling the VA, "I have everything, judge me now." If you missed a crucial piece of evidence, or if the evidence you submitted is weak, the VA will not pause to tell you to fix it. They will simply deny the claim based on the insufficient evidence you provided. This mistake often results from impatience and a lack of understanding of the legal requirements for a successful claim. Legal guidance is crucial here because an attorney or accredited agent understands precisely what constitutes a fully developed claim that meets the legal burden of proof. They ensure that the claim package is bulletproof before submission. This includes obtaining private medical records that the VA cannot access easily, conducting thorough research to establish the proper nexus, and structuring the lay evidence to maximize its probative value. They understand that an FDC must be submitted with the expectation that the VA will only rely on the documents provided. Furthermore, veterans sometimes file an FDC and then continue to submit documentation piecemeal afterward. This defeats the entire purpose of the FDC and can confuse the rater, potentially slowing down the process or leading to a denial based on conflicting information. If you choose the FDC route, it must be comprehensive, airtight, and submitted as a single, cohesive package. If you are still gathering medical evidence or if you are waiting for an IMO, the FDC is not the correct route, no matter how tempting the promise of a faster decision may be. Choosing the wrong filing strategy based on an incomplete understanding of the required evidence is a common and highly detrimental mistake. Chaturandastri. Mistake 5. Focusing on diagnosis, not severity. The rating schedule trap. This mistake is insidious because it often leads to a veteran winning their claim but receiving a pitifully low rating. The veteran successfully proves the service connection and gets a diagnosis, but they fail to understand that the VA does not compensate for the existence of a condition. They compensate for the severity and the resulting functional impairment. The VA rating schedule is a complex, almost Byzantine system that assigns percentage ratings based on very specific criteria. The primary error is stopping the evidence gathering once the diagnosis is confirmed. For example, a veteran might be diagnosed with major depressive disorder connected to their service. They assume this will automatically result in a high rating. However, the rating schedule for mental health conditions ranges from 0% to 100%. The difference between 30% and 70% is massive, and it hinges entirely on functional impairment. A 30% rating describes occupational and social impairment with occasional decrease in work efficiency and intermittent periods of inability to perform occupational tasks. A 70% rating describes occupational and social impairment with deficiencies in most areas, such as work, school, family relations, judgment, and mood. The veteran must provide evidence that directly correlates their symptoms to the specific language used in the rating schedule. If the veteran statement, the C&P report, and the lay statements do not use language that mirrors the criteria for 70% or 100%, the rater is legally obligated to assign a lower rating. Veterans often submit evidence that is too general. They say, "I have trouble sleeping." The rating schedule requires more. It requires evidence of persistent insomnia, suicidal ideation, inability to manage stress, and chronic isolation. Another critical component of severity is the frequency and duration of symptoms. If you claim migraines, the VA doesn't just care that you have them. They care if they are prostrating, meaning you must stop all activity and lie down, and how often they occur. If you have prostrating attacks less than once a month, you get 0%. If you have them once a month, you get 10%. If you have them daily, you get 50%. The veteran must track this data meticulously, and the evidence must be consistent. Inconsistent tracking or minimization during the C&P exam directly leads to low ratings. Furthermore, many veterans fail to consider the impact of the condition on their ability to work, leading to a failure to claim eligibility for total disability individual unemployability, TDIU. TDIU is a program for veterans who may not meet the 100% scheduled rating criteria but are unable to maintain gainful employment due to their service-connected disabilities. The mistake is that veterans often focus solely on the percentage, ignoring the possibility that their combined lower ratings, e.g. 70% or 80%, actually render them unemployable. Legal representation ensures that the medical evidence and lay statements are structured not only to hit the highest scheduled rating, but also to establish the functional limitations necessary to qualify for TDIU, which pays at the 100% rate. In essence, focusing only on the diagnosis is like proving you have a car, but failing to prove the car is permanently broken and unusable. The VA needs proof of the broken parts and the resulting inability to drive. If you fail to meticulously document the functional impact of your condition, you will receive a rating far below what you deserve, costing you substantial monthly compensation for the rest of your life. This requires a deep understanding of the specific diagnostic codes, DCs, relevant to your condition, a level of detail most veterans simply do not possess when navigating the system alone. Chartburster, Mistake 6. Missing or misunderstanding, critical deadlines and appeal routes. The VA claims system is littered with rigid, unforgiving deadlines. Missing a deadline doesn't just slow down your claim, it can force you to restart the entire process, potentially losing years of retroactive benefits. Veterans who navigate the process without legal help often fall victim to the procedural traps built into the appeals system. The first critical mistake is misunderstanding the effective date. The effective date is usually the date the VA received your initial claim or the date they received your intent to file, ITF. This date determines when your benefits start accruing. If you file a claim, it is denied, and you wait too long to appeal, you lose the continuity of that effective date. You might have to file a new claim, and the new effective date will be the date of the new filing, costing you years of back pay. The VA system is designed to reward veterans who maintain continuity through the complex appeal process. The second major mistake involves the appeal lanes established by the Appeals Modernization Act, AMA, of 2017. Veterans who receive a denial now have 3 options for appeal, and choosing the wrong one can be disastrous. The options are: 1. Supplemental claim. Submitting new and relevant evidence. 2. Higher Level Review, HLR. Requesting a senior rater review the existing evidence for errors. 3. Board of Veterans Appeals, BVA. Appealing directly to a veterans law judge. Veterans often pick the wrong lane. For instance, if the VA denied your claim because they missed a piece of evidence in your file, an HLR is the quickest route. If the VA denied your claim because you failed to establish a nexus, simply requesting an HLR without submitting new medical evidence is futile. You should file a supplemental claim with a strong IMO. If you submit a supplemental claim but fail to provide new and relevant evidence, the claim will be denied again. The legal definition of new and relevant is strict and often misunderstood. It must be evidence that was not previously considered and that has a reasonable chance of changing the outcome. The deadlines for these appeals are strict, generally 1 year from the date of the decision letter. Missing that 1-year mark means the decision becomes final, and you must start over with a new intent to file, forfeiting all the back pay accrued since the original effective date. This is arguably the most financially devastating mistake a veteran can make. Furthermore, veterans often fail to understand the difference between filing a new claim and filing an appeal. If a condition is denied, you must appeal that specific decision to maintain the effective date. Filing a new claim for the same condition is a procedural mistake that sacrifices your accrued benefits. Legal representation ensures that every denial is met with a timely and strategically sound response, maintaining the continuity of the claim and protecting the original effective date. The VA system is a bureaucratic maze, and without a guide who understands the specific timelines and procedural requirements of the AMA, veterans are almost guaranteed to make a procedural error that costs them years of compensation. Chapter Mistake 7. Failing to seek secondary connections and aggravation claims. The final critical mistake is tunnel vision. Veterans often focus only on the most obvious direct service connection, entirely missing the opportunity to claim secondary conditions or aggravation of pre-existing conditions. These secondary and aggravation claims can significantly boost the overall rating and are often easier to prove than the initial direct connection. A secondary service connection occurs when a service-connected disability causes or aggravates a new disability. For example, if you have a service-connected knee injury, 50%, and because you favor that knee, you subsequently develop chronic hip and back pain, the hip and back pain can be claimed as secondary disabilities. The nexus requirement still applies, but instead of connecting the back pain to a specific in-service event, you connect it to the already service-connected knee injury. The mistake here is simply not recognizing the connection. Many veterans treat their secondary ailments as separate, non-service-connected issues. They are often surprised to learn that their weight gain due to service-connected PTSD medication, which then leads to sleep apnea, can result in sleep apnea being service-connected as a secondary condition. Similarly, chronic pain from a service injury often leads to depression, anxiety, or erectile dysfunction. These are all potential secondary claims that veterans frequently fail to pursue because they don't understand the legal and medical relationship between the conditions. A. Claim for aggravation is another overlooked pathway. This applies when a veteran entered service with a pre-existing condition, e.g., mild arthritis, but the rigors of service permanently worsened that condition beyond its natural progression. The VA doesn't compensate for the original condition, but they compensate for the degree of aggravation caused by service. The burden of proof here is slightly different, requiring medical evidence that establishes the baseline severity of the condition upon entry and the increased severity caused by active duty. Veterans often assume that if a condition was noted on their entrance physical, it's automatically excluded. This is false. If service made it worse, you're entitled to compensation for that increased severity. Legal expertise is vital for these claims because they require two separate nexus statements, one establishing the initial connection in the case of a secondary claim, and a second establishing the link between the primary disability and the secondary one. For aggravation claims, specialized medical opinions are needed to differentiate between the natural progression of the disease and the service-caused worsening. Without this specialized legal and medical guidance, veterans typically miss these secondary claims, leaving significant rating percentages unclaimed. A veteran with a 50% primary rating might be entitled to 90% or 100% by successfully linking 2 or 3 secondary conditions. But this requires a systematic, thorough review of their entire medical history, a review that is rarely conducted by the veteran filing alone. The VA system is designed to be adversarial. It requires the veteran to proactively and accurately build a complex legal and medical case. Failing to utilize secondary and aggravation claims is leaving significant compensation on the table simply because the veteran didn't know the full scope of benefits they were entitled to pursue under VA law. The comprehensive overlap and the cost of going solo. These 7 mistakes do not exist in a vacuum. They often overlap and compound, creating a cycle of denial and frustration. A veteran files an FDC, mistake 4, that lacks a strong IMO, mistake 1, and omits crucial lay statements, mistake 2. The claim is quickly denied. The veteran then misses the deadline for appeal, mistake 6, or files the wrong type of appeal, losing their effective date. They then try to refile, but still only focus on the diagnosis, resulting in a low rating, mistake 5, while ignoring the secondary conditions caused by the primary disability, mistake 7. This chain of errors turns a deserving claim into a years-long battle that ultimately results in insufficient compensation. The single common denominator in all these mistakes is the veteran's lack of understanding regarding the burden of proof and the specific legal requirements of the VA system. The VA does not operate on common sense or sympathy. It operates on regulatory compliance. Every piece of evidence, every statement, and every procedural step must conform to the highly technical standards set forth in Title 38 of the Code of Federal Regulations. When you file without legal help, you are taking on the role of claimant, medical expert, legal researcher, paralegal, and appellate attorney. This is an impossible task for someone already struggling with service-connected disabilities. The cost of legal representation is often recovered many times over through increased ratings and maximized back pay, which can total tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. The decision to go it alone is often an attempt to save money, but it almost always results in the largest financial loss possible: the loss of earned benefits. If you are a veteran struggling with the VA process, if you have been denied, or if you feel your rating is too low, you must stop making these fundamental mistakes. You must shift your focus from simply telling your story to building an undeniable, legally sound case. Review your claim history. Identify where the nexus is weak. Find the missing lay evidence. Understand the functional requirements of your diagnostic code. Protect your effective date. You served honorably, and you deserve the full benefits you earned. The time to stop fighting the VA alone and start fighting them with a comprehensive, legally informed strategy is now. Don't let procedural complexity and legal ignorance cost you the financial security you fought for.